how to keep a conversation going effortlessly. If you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It truly helps the channel grow and continue to create contents like this. Most conversations don't actually end because people run out of things to say. They end because the pressure quietly creeps in. That subtle feeling of, I need to keep this interesting, shows up, and the moment it does, the flow changes. Your attention shifts inward. You start monitoring yourself, and the conversation that felt natural a second ago suddenly feels like work. Keeping a conversation going effortlessly has far less to do with talking and far more to do with how you listen. That might sound obvious, but most people don't really listen. They wait. They wait for their turn, for an opening, for something clever to add. And when you're waiting instead of listening, the conversation slowly loses momentum. The most important thing to understand is that conversation is not a performance. It's a shared rhythm. When that rhythm is there, it carries itself. When it's not, no amount of clever questions will save it. A lot of people believe good conversationalists always have something interesting to say. In reality, they're just good at staying connected to what's already being said. They don't jump topics unnecessarily. They don't abandon threads too early. They let ideas breathe. Think about how conversations naturally flow when you're comfortable with someone you trust. You don't feel the need to entertain. You respond to what's there. You pause when needed. You follow curiosity instead of agenda. That same energy is available in any conversation if you stop trying to manage the outcome. One of the simplest ways to keep a conversation going is to stay one step behind instead of one step ahead. Instead of thinking about what comes next, stay with what just happened. What did they emphasize? What emotion showed up? What detail did they linger on? Those are signals. When someone talks, they're constantly leaving small doors open. A word they stress, a story they shorten, a comment they brush past. Most people miss these because they're focused on adding value instead of noticing it. But value is already there if you pay attention. A conversation stalls when someone introduces something disconnected from the current emotional tone, not because the topic is bad, but because the timing is off. Flow depends on continuity. You don't need new fuel. You need to keep the existing fire alive. Another reason conversations die is fear of silence. Silence isn't the enemy. Forced talking is. Silence gives both people space to think, reflect, and reset. When you treat silence like a problem to fix, you create tension. When you allow it, you create room. People who are comfortable with silence come across as grounded. They don't rush. They don't scramble. That calmness keeps conversations alive because it removes pressure. There's also a misunderstanding about questions. Questions are useful, but they're not magic. Rapid-fire questioning can feel like an interview. What keeps conversations flowing is response, not interrogation. A comment plus curiosity works far better than question after question. For example, instead of asking a follow-up immediately, you might share a brief reflection. Not a story that hijacks the conversation, but a response that shows you're engaged. That response invites more naturally than a question ever could. Another key piece is emotional mirroring. When someone is animated, meet that energy. When they're calm, slow down. Mismatched energy creates friction. Matched energy builds flow. Conversations feel effortless when both people feel understood, not impressed. That's an important distinction. Understanding creates safety. Safety allows people to expand. A lot of people worry about being boring, but boredom rarely comes from simplicity. It comes from disconnection. A simple topic discussed with genuine interest feels alive. A complex topic discussed without presence feels flat. You don't need to manufacture enthusiasm. Forced enthusiasm is easy to detect. Authentic engagement, even if quiet, is far more compelling. There's also value in letting conversations naturally change shape. Not every interaction needs to stay at the same level. Some moments are light, some drift deeper, some circle back to surface-level comfort. Letting that happen without resistance keeps things fluid. When you try to control the depth or direction too tightly, the conversation stiffens. When you allow it to unfold, it breathes. Another thing people overlook is how much their internal state affects flow. If you're anxious, tired, or distracted, conversation will feel harder. That's not a personal failure, it's information. Managing your energy matters more than memorizing techniques. Sometimes, keeping a conversation going simply means staying present, long enough for the next natural opening to appear. You don't have to force it, you just have to stay available. There's a subtle confidence in not needing to fill every space. That confidence communicates ease, and ease keeps people talking. One of the most misunderstood moments in conversation is when the energy dips. People feel it immediately. The pace slows, responses shorten, and that familiar internal alarm goes off. This is usually the point where someone panics and tries to rescue the interaction with a sudden topic change or a burst of forced enthusiasm. And that's almost always the wrong move. Every conversation has waves. Energy rises, settles, rises again. When you expect constant momentum, you interpret a natural dip as failure. But when you understand that dips are part of the rhythm, you stop fighting them, and paradoxically, the conversation lasts longer. Instead of reacting to the dip, acknowledge it internally and slow down. Often the best thing you can do is stay present and give the other person space to re-engage. Silence, when it's relaxed, invites reflection. Reflection leads to depth. Another powerful skill is learning how to revive flow without restarting the conversation from scratch. You don't need a new subject. You just need to reconnect to what already exists. Revisiting a detail from earlier, referencing something they mentioned before, or lightly summarizing where the conversation has been can gently bring it back to life. People feel valued when they're remembered. Even small moments of recall signal attention. That attention encourages them to open up again, often without you needing to ask anything. There's also an art to knowing when a conversation has naturally completed its arc. Effortless conversationalists aren't afraid to let interactions end cleanly. They don't drag things out to avoid discomfort. They trust the moment. Ending a conversation gracefully leaves a better impression than forcing it to continue past its natural point. This is where self-awareness comes in. If you're clinging to conversation out of fear, fear of awkwardness, fear of rejection, fear of silence, that tension shows up. But when you're comfortable letting go, people feel it, and conversations paradoxically feel more alive while they're happening. Another reason conversations stall is over-explaining. When you talk too long without pause, you unintentionally close the door for response. Shorter, clearer thoughts create space. Space invites participation. Think of conversation like passing a ball. If you hold it too long, the game stops. If you throw it recklessly, it breaks rhythm. The sweet spot is awareness, knowing when to pass, when to hold, and when to let the game pause. Something else that matters is curiosity without urgency. When curiosity is rushed, it feels intrusive. When it's patient, it feels inviting. You're not digging for information, you're following interest. People can sense when you're genuinely interested versus when you're asking questions to keep things going. The first builds connection. The second builds pressure. Effortless conversation also comes from being okay with not being interesting all the time. You don't need to entertain. You don't need to teach. You don't need to impress. When you release that responsibility, your natural voice comes forward, and that's what people connect with. It's worth mentioning that some conversations feel effortless because of chemistry, timing, and shared energy, and some don't. That doesn't mean you lack skill. It means you're human. Not every interaction is meant to flow endlessly, and that's okay. Another important piece is emotional regulation. When you notice tension rising in yourself, grounding techniques help more than conversational tricks. Slowing your breathing, relaxing your shoulders, and lowering your vocal pace can reset the entire interaction. Your body communicates before your words do. If your body is calm, your words follow. There's also value in allowing conversations to be imperfect. Pauses, restarts, half-finished thoughts, these are normal. When you stop trying to smooth them out, conversations feel more real, more human. People often feel most connected not during perfectly polished exchanges, but during moments of shared imperfection. A pause that turns into a laugh, a thought that trails off and then finds its way back. Those moments create warmth. As you practice keeping conversations going, you'll start to notice that effortlessness isn't about control. It's about trust, trusting yourself, trusting the moment, trusting that you don't need to manage every second. The more you trust the process, the less mental energy conversation requires. And when conversation requires less energy, it becomes sustainable. Over time, what once felt like effort turns into intuition. You stop thinking about what to say and start responding naturally. You feel the rhythm instead of forcing it, and eventually, you realize something important. The best conversations aren't kept alive by techniques. They're kept alive by presence. When you're present, curious, and relaxed, conversation carries itself. And when it doesn't, you let it rest, without judgment, without panic, without self-criticism. That's what effortless conversation really is. Not endless talking, but comfortable connection. Not perfect flow, but shared awareness. And once you understand that, keeping a conversation going stops being something you work at and starts being something you allow.